One of the biggest failures in business is either fast growth or not taking action is one. The other is taking way too much action too fast and not having the talent and the team behind you that can carry all of that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Optimal In Sync with Trish. I'm Trish Hagley, a business efficiency expert who works with businesses that provide services to other businesses. I use a one-day summit to get your clients to stay longer, pay more, and refer often while supporting team morale. Today, we have as our guest, Jeremy Greenberg. Jeremy has created multi-million-dollar business units from scratch at 2 Fortune 500s and built million-dollar products and services companies on his own as an entrepreneur. Jeremy is the founder of the advisory firm Avenue Group and the CEO of the exercise equipment company Flight Fitness. He has been interviewed by several media outlets, including Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and the Los Angeles Times. Jeremy holds a BA in Economics and Philosophy from Brandeis University and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Jeremy is from Bethesda, Maryland, and an obscure fact about him is that he has an identical twin. Now, are we sure it's Jeremy on today? Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Trish. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's quite an honor.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure for us to have you. All right, so getting on to the question format of the podcast, tell us, what is the problem that you solve?
So our company Avenue Group and our website is avegroup.com.
Mm-hmm.
We are a company that does a lot of things, but our bread and butter is figuring out what is in the heads of customers,
mm-hmm.
Be they clients or prospects or even competitors, to better understand how to make investments in new companies or new products or new markets to address the needs of these individuals. Mm-hmm. So we work with private equity firms when they're evaluating buying companies or investing in companies. We work with venture capital firms, with family offices, and then we also work with large companies that are operating, so to help them turn around their business lines or increase growth.
Okay, that's great. I might know a couple of people that are on my podcast that I can introduce you to.
Wonderful.
What are the common mistakes do you think that people make when they're trying to solve the problem that you do solve?
I think that the number one mistake is that they don't actually realize that there's a problem. Mm-hmm. So we've worked with dozens and dozens of companies at Avenue Group, and we find that most business leaders don't really focus sufficiently on understanding what makes their customers and the market really tick. Some of them will have an internal group focused on insights or will outsource work to a research firm, but that usually is insufficient. So very often companies will, they'll do like a survey and they'll kind of check the box and say, hey, we did this analysis without really understanding their customers. So I think that's one issue. And then in terms of how to actually approach the problem, we have a whole process we call customer diplomacy, where we understand that the relationship that businesses have with their customers is very tenuous and it's transactional. Unless you're the grocery store family, mom and pop business on the corner, and you know all your customers, you're probably not friends with your customers. You probably don't know your customers. Your customers don't know you. And it's important to listen to your customers by reaching out to them and having real conversations with them in ways that are going to directly impact how you run your business.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting because when I used to work in corporate, this is maybe a slightly different perspective or a slightly different situation than when you were describing. But I know a little bit about the customer with regard to their personal life, but I was more focused on what they needed for a business. And the way I was able to develop a relationship with with the clients at the time when I was working in corporate, as I said, is that I made sure I anticipated their needs. So I really did listen to what they were saying, and I listened to what they needed, so that I delivered that before they even asked for it. And I think, as you mentioned, it's the one way to keep, the tenuous relationship a little less tenuous.
Well, you're ahead of the curve, Trish, for sure. And this applies to B2C companies, but also B2B companies. And even if you don't necessarily even have direct customers. So even if you just want to understand better how a competitive arena is looking, how an industry works, how a company may get into a new product category, there's always a lot of learning that needs to be done. And all too often companies sit in a conference room or do their version of that, and they are focused very internally, and it's really easy to get caught in the paradigm that you view the world through as an operator of a company. It's really easy to get hung up on your acronyms and your ways of working and the processes that you have, and just forget that that's not the context or the way that a normal person would think about your product or your service. So we advocate talking directly with people. We also are really in favor of doing qualitative research before quantitative research. I think in this day and age, people have treasure troves of data that they've accumulated on their customers or in the market. But the data doesn't necessarily give you the answer, that you may need, because it might be missing something. And B, you have to organize and analyze the data. It's not like if you just the presence of data is going to lead to insight. You need to know how to evaluate and what hypotheses to use. So by using qualitative research first and speaking with people and having a dialogue that's back and forth, what we found is that you can identify a lot more information that not only helps you learn about your customers or your market, but also helps you set up a quantitative research study that addresses the key questions better. So, what are the types of language you should use when you talk with your customers? What words are they using? What do they understand? What do they not understand? What are the drivers that are important for them in terms of their satisfaction? And talking in their language and addressing their concerns is a better way of doing quantitative, say a survey, than just guessing at it. And it's really, really sexy, I think, to say, oh, let's create a survey. Let's try to get 1,000 or 2,000 people to respond, and then we'll create graphs and charts and we'll send to the big boss, and everyone will be happy. But if you're not asking the right question, it doesn't matter if you ask 1,000 or 2,000 people. You could be missing something really, really big. And if you have, say 10 or 15 conversations with actual people back and forth, more often than not, you'll find something that you were not thinking of that is very, very important to learn more about.
So would you say that's your number one tip then for the people?
Well, the number one tip is to do something, recognizing that this is an issue, right? And not pay it lip service. But I think, one tip is, a more specific tip is to do qualitative before you do quantitative. We often are overconfident around our ability to develop a quantitative survey just to get, we're eager to get data quickly, but that can be a mistake very often. And, data alone is not going to drive decision making. If you think about major decisions that companies have made, the headline is not because of data. The headline is because there's a narrative, there's a story supporting the data. If your sales are down 10%, there's a reason why your sales are down 10%. Maybe there's a particular demographic that's down. Well, okay, so if your millennials are not purchasing as much, why? Well, talk to them and get a sense for what that is, as opposed to just saying sales are down 10%. So really digging in and understanding, what are the drivers and what's affecting what, as opposed to just focusing on on the output, which is the data and the results. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Optimal Instinct with Trish is brought to you by TrishTagley.com and the book Everyone Knows You Suck, Bad Boss Stories, A Succinct Guide, available now in both ebook and print format on Amazon.com. And the C's Value Model that supports your desire for client relationships that are more profitable, more productive, and more likely to refer. To understand more about the C's model, go to clientvaluedemo.com. Yeah, I think a lot of people, you're right, a lot of people are so focused on the numbers because of, we've heard it, oh, it's a numbers game, it's a, here's more data, large, big data, et cetera, data. But, as you said, what's the context around those numbers? That's more important, I think, initially than just getting the numbers. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So let's see. What should I have asked you that I did not?
You didn't ask me about my dog.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned my twin brother, but you didn't ask me about my dog.
Okay, let's talk about your dog.
Well, I think so. I have a wonderful dog named Buddy. He's a 3.5-year-old rescue, Beagle Chihuahua, some Rat Terrier. But he actually taught me a lot about this concept of customer diplomacy. So I have another company I run, as you mentioned, which is Flight Fitness, and it's an exercise company. And when I first adopted Buddy, I emailed a number of different dog walking and dog training organizations to kind of get myself up to speed, right? And some responded and some didn't. So I kind of forgot about it. And then I noticed I was getting an email from one company that's a dog training email. And it was always the same email. And it would say, thank you for contacting us, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sort of thinking, why are these guys continuously emailing me? So I wrote not the friendliest note, basically saying, hey, it'd be, I've already found someone. I'd really appreciate it if you could take me off your email list. And then I get a response that I didn't expect, which was, well, first I got the auto response, which is thanks for contacting, blah, blah, blah. Then I got a person that said, I ordered your fitness product and that's how you treat me. You want me to take you off your email list. So what I didn't realize is that the reason the person was sending these automated emails is because they were on our fitness company email list, and there was an automatic response. So in my head, I was thinking, this person's bothering me, but the reality was that I was actually marketing to her as a customer, and I was soliciting her, and then I was telling her to stop soliciting me. So we ended up having a conversation about it, and bonding over dogs and so forth, because that's her industry. But I think that, to me, it's a lesson, which is you never know the context by which someone is sending you a message, or your messages could be interpreted.
Yes.
I never thought, it was kind of a brain fart in my, I should have thought about it, but I didn't. And I've got my blinders on, right? I've got my Flight Fitness blinders on, or I'm taking care of my dog blinders on. But we have to be really careful in that these guys can overlap a lot. And I had to do some relationship mending to appease that customer, as I should have.
Because customer diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's an interesting story, and thanks for bringing your dog into it and then sliding right into.
always have to bring Buddy into it.
That's fantastic. But that's a great story. And yes, I mean, even for people who are listening to this podcast, if you do have a mailing list, be careful about how you respond to, the people that you keep getting email from, because you never know. Maybe it's actually, something that has to do with the different mechanisms behind the scenes, the different integrations. And it's actually you.
Yeah, you just need to be like, you just need to be more. I need to be more aware that it could be email, or it could be someone I'm introduced to, or it could be someone who's applying for a job that doesn't get it. It's always good to be courteous, respectful, and assume the best of the other party. You never know, like in this case, I was literally, telling a customer to stop emailing me, which is not a great practice.
That's a fantastic story, and one that I'm sure our listeners are going to remember. Well, Jeremy, we've come to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much. It was very entertaining and lesson filled for sure. I hope that I'll talk to you again, and thank you everyone for listening. This is Trish. Talk to you next time. Thank you very much for joining us on Optimal Instinct with Trish. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, head on over to iTunes, subscribe, and if you really enjoy the content, leave us a well-appreciated review. If you are looking to create an environment that partners your desire for more profitable, more productive, and greater referability in client relationships, combined with sustained team morale, then I suggest you head over to clientvaluedemo.com to learn more about the C's value model. Talk soon.